So this particular study was focused upon online course design. In particular, within the K-12 online learning environment, the amount of K-12 online learning is growing exponentially. Back in 2001, they estimated there were about 40 to 50,000 kids in the U.S. that were involved in K-12 distance education. This past year, that number was anywhere between 2 to 8 million, depending upon whose statistic you believe. Even if you look at the lower amount, we've essentially gone from roughly 0.25% of kids involved with online learning to approximately 8% of all K-12 kids in the U.S. that will take at least one or more online courses this year. Now, what that means is that a lot of the material that kids are learning in school are coming from the asynchronous course content that's housed in somebody's learning management system. And as I'm sure all of you know, most of that wasn't taught to you in your teacher preparation programs. It may not have been even taught to you in your graduate education programs. So where do you look for guidance for that? Within the K-12 online learning literature and the field in general, there's a number of standards that have been put out there. Quality Matters has one. The International Association for K-12 Online Learning has one. Virtual High School has one. Electronic Classroom Tomorrow has a set of standards. The problem is that most of these standards aren't based upon research at all. In fact, the only one that is based upon reliable and valid research, one by Quality Matters, is actually proprietary. So you have to pay a fairly hefty subscription in order to use that. And for most K-12 organizations, it's a subscription that's just unaffordable. Now, the one most people end up using is one that I call INACL, the International Association for K-12 Online Learning. Their standards. They released them in 2007 and updated them in 2011. And while they have been adopted for use in many states, including the state of California here actually, they aren't actually based upon reliable and valid research. So what David did as a part of his dissertation was he went through the process that, or at least some of the steps of a process that you would normally go through in order to validate standards. So he did it through 3 phases, and in each of the 3 phases he was testing a different aspect of the standards in terms of their reliability and their validity. So in the first phase, which we've got up here at least in terms of the results, the methodology that was used in that particular phase was a literature review. One of the first ways in which you can determine at least the validity of standards is to, is there research to support each of the individual standards that are included in there. So Dave went through and looked at all 52 standards to determine whether or not there was research to support those. For the most part, he found that there wasn't. Limited research available, but for the most part, there wasn't a good research base for that. So the next phase that you often get is you will have a group of experts in the field that you bring together to determine, what should a good online course include in terms of design. So Dave brought together 2 groups of experts, including folks that were administrators, course designers, online teachers, researchers, and had one of each in each of the groups. And they went through each of the INACL standards one by one to determine, is this something that should actually measure good online course design? And as they went through, one of the things that they found was that most of the standards, at least the experts thought, were reasonable. Not necessarily good, but reasonable. There were a couple there that they decided to delete. Actually, approximately 11 that they decided just weren't valid at all. And then there was another 9 that they felt could be combined either with each other or with another standard that was somewhere else in the document. From that, they actually ended up with a revised version that had approximately 44 standards left in it. So in phase 3, what Dave does is he gets a group of reviewers, teachers like yourself, although they had background with either teaching online courses or designing online courses. Got them in groups of 2 and told them to go out and review 5 courses using this revised rubric independently. So they weren't working together. And they were testing to see essentially whether or not they came up with the same responses. Because if the rubric was, if it had content validity, what you saw in a course and what you saw in a course would be the same thing. So you're essentially trying to measure inter-rater reliability. So one of the things that Dave found, and this is a sample of one of the sections here, section 3, where Dave went through and found that for the most part, very few of the standards actually had inter-rater reliability. of the 40 odd that were left, there was only 7 that had interrated reliability. So basically, we've gone through this process now that took almost 3 years, went through 3 different phases, involved some 12 experts in the field as well as another 10 practitioners to try to apply this, only to find that the rubric that is being used by states like Michigan, Texas, and California doesn't have any research reliability whatsoever, research validity whatsoever, but yet it is, according to the Departments of Education in each of those states, what is considered the acceptable way of determining whether or not a course is good in those states.